Welcome back, class. This video is going to continue our discussion of social epistemology and our attempt to share and consume information online by talking about Wen's article about echo chambers. So in the video, we're going to start by talking about what echo chambers are and how they're different from filter bubbles that we discussed last time. Then we're going to talk about why are these problematic? What's the threat that these pose to our ability to share and gain knowledge within our society? Then, how do we deal with that problem? What are the solutions? All right, so remember, many people worry that each of us lives our lives in an epistemic or filter bubble, and that this is largely due to the way that our online consumption and sharing of information is structured. But this epistemic or filter bubble, it's meant to be a social structure involving an informational network or ways in which we share and gain knowledge with one another, such that certain sources have been excluded from that network by omission. Now, many people worry that these kind of epistemic or filter bubbles online are contributing to this worrisome increase in partisan divides. So this increased division regarding our political and social beliefs held throughout our society. But that explanation, trying to say that these algorithms of our social media and Google searches and online consumption of information, those algorithms of which we're unaware are biasing towards sort of confirming our own views by leaving out all this information, that explanation seems to fail because it doesn't explain why many people report that they do read and listen to news from the other side. Many conservatives say that they do read liberal news sources in order to get a read on what the other side is saying. Moreover, when people are exposed to the evidence and arguments and reasoning of the other side, this doesn't tend to make them less confident in their views. They actually become more confident. They sort of dig in deeper and become more convinced that they are right than they were before they saw the arguments and evidence of the other side. So, what Wen himself thinks is more likely to be the culprit of explaining the current situation we see with our online lives within our society is due to what he calls an echo chamber. So the phrases filter bubble and echo chamber, they've started to become used interchangeably within our society, but when they were originally introduced, they actually meant different things. And Wen is using an echo chamber specifically to refer to a social structure from which other relevant voices have been actively discredited. So it's not just that they are excluded by omission. It's not just that what they say, what they believe, their arguments and their evidence is being left out. It's that these social structures teach one to distrust and disbelieve what those voices are saying. Now, sometimes when he talks about these issues, he puts it this way. Filter bubbles are social structures that prevent someone from hearing the other side. So they're just sort of blinded. It never gets through the filters, so they never see it in the first place. Echo chambers are social structures where people are taught not to trust the other side. So that even if they do see it, even if it gets through their filter, they're taught that information coming from those sources is not trustworthy. The example that he relies on the most is the example of Rush Limbaugh. If you don't know who Rush Limbaugh is, Rush Limbaugh was a very extremely conservative talk show host that had a sort of cult-like following. And Rush Limbaugh taught that he is the sort of lone sort of person in the media is sort of speaking truth to power, and the mainstream media is corrupted by the elite institutions of politics, and they're just out to get the little guy, including him. And so, again, echo chambers often include these kind of conspiracy theories about outsiders trying to manipulate persons for their own nefarious purposes. Now, why are these echo chambers so worrisome? These structures that teach people not to trust the other side in this way? Well, it's because members in an echo chamber, they're given a belief system conditioning them to accept evidence from people that already share their core beliefs. But members are taught that the only real experts, the only real authorities, the only real trusted sources are people and groups that already agree with their core beliefs. So if they agree with these core beliefs, then you can trust them, then they're actually experts, and you should give credence to what they have to say. But members are taught that outsiders, people who have opposing worldviews, are attacking their belief system that they're taught in the echo chamber because these outsiders are corrupt, evil, and oftentimes they're part of a large conspiracy that are against their members, trying to manipulate them and get them to believe things for, yet again, for the outsider's own nefarious purposes. And if that's a part of the belief system itself, that people inside are trustworthy and people outside are manipulators and working for nefarious purposes, those beliefs thereby prime them to reject any counter evidence, because that counter evidence is always going to come from an outsider, and the outsiders are not to be trusted. And so that evidence, even if it looks like good evidence against them, is coming from a source that is clearly just trying to manipulate them. And thus, if someone lives in an echo chamber, mistaken beliefs won't be fixed merely by citing more information, by giving them the evidence that they're missing. Because when you give them the evidence that they're missing, they're going to say, I can't trust you. You're one of them. So even if they hear the evidence, they're already primed to reject it. And so you can't fix the problem by just giving them that evidence. So echo chambers in that way are cult-like. It's not just a filter, it's a cult. And it involves a highly sophisticated form of confirmation bias because they are primed to accept evidence that's given from people that agree with them. That's part of the belief system itself. But the belief system itself also says when someone gives you evidence against your view, that's because they're an outsider and not to be trusted. It gives an easy way to reject those things that try to disconfirm. So you're biased towards only accepting evidence that confirms what you already believe. But it's even worse than this, because exposing a member of an echo chamber to this contrary counter evidence, it's not just that they're already primed to reject it as coming from someone untrustworthy. It's the fact that attacking their beliefs or criticizing their beliefs with this counter evidence can actually end up to reinforcing their current belief system. So instead of this counter evidence getting them to reject or become less confident in their beliefs, it causes them to become more confident in their belief system. I mean, how would that happen? If this really is evidence that their views are wrong, why would it actually end up reinforcing their beliefs? Well, the example that Nguyen gives, he says, Rush Limbaugh might offer his followers a conspiracy theory. So part of what Limbaugh teaches his followers to believe is that anybody who criticizes him is doing it at the behest of a secret cabal of evil elites, which has already seized control of the mainstream media. And so Limbaugh is telling them, when you hear mainstream media, when you hear CNN, MSNBC, when you hear those news outlets talk about me, they are going to attack my character. They're going to tell you that I'm a moral monster. They're going to tell you that I'm an idiot. They're going to tell you that I've missed all these facts. And they're going to try to manipulate you and turn you against me. But if that's part of what Limbaugh tells his viewers to believe, and if they trust him already, well, the idea is the more that they go out there and they see the mainstream media calling out Limbaugh and criticizing him, notice that's exactly what Limbaugh predicted that they would do. And so the more Limbaugh's predictions are confirmed in that way. Perversely, exposure to outsiders with contrary views will thereby increase echo chambers members' confidence in their insider sources, and hence their attachment to their own worldview, their own belief system, is just going to increase. So that counter evidence backfires. Nguyen calls this intellectual judo. It's an attack that should harm the belief system of members of the echo chamber, but the echo chamber includes a belief system, a way of countering that evidence so as to take the attack and turn it against the attacker. One reason that Wen thinks that echo chambers are better than filter bubbles to explain the division we see within our society is because these echo chambers can explain why many people's beliefs are impervious to facts and counter evidence. If the problem was just that we weren't hearing the other side, then all we need to do is give them the evidence, the reasoning, the arguments that they missed, that they haven't heard yet. And once they do, we'll fix the problem. But that's not what we see in practice. And echo chambers can explain why, even when we give them, when they do hear the arguments from the other side, they don't respond. They don't give up their beliefs like we think that they should. But there are other potential alternatives to explain why people don't respond to counter evidence by giving up their beliefs. One alternative explanation that's somewhat popular in our society today is just to say it's what's called the post-truth era explanation. So this says, look, the reason when you give counter evidence to people that they don't change their mind is because people just don't care about truth anymore. They don't care about being right. They just believe whatever they want to believe, and they don't care if it's right or wrong. They're just going to believe it anyways. Now, Wen says that he thinks the post-truth era explanation is not as good of an explanation as the appeal to echo chambers. Because he says, look, a simpler explanation is that people just have different sets of trusted authorities. Moreover, when you look at people in echo chambers, it oftentimes doesn't look like they're disinterested in facts and truth. They're doing a lot of the things we would think of as critical thinking. They're thinking about where the sources of these beliefs are coming from. They're trying to evaluate their trustworthiness, their reliability before they accept what they say. These are things that we expect critical thinkers that are trying to figure out the truth to do. And so it looks like the echo chamber explanation is a better explanation. Let's assume for the moment that Nguyen is correct that echo chambers is what correctly explains why people tend to fail to be moved by counter evidence. If he's correctly diagnosed the problem, what would the solution to that problem be? How would we help people escape the echo chambers that they get stuck in? Now, one possibility, you might say, they shouldn't be trusting the people in the echo chamber either. They need to critically evaluate those persons too. They shouldn't trust anybody for their information until they've verified it themselves. Everything they accept, they need to verify through their own research process and never trust anyone. But Wen says, no, that's not the solution. The solution isn't to ramp up intellectual autonomy, where you check everything yourself and try to verify everything before you believe it. That kind of individualism would throw out the baby with the bathwater. The idea is, look, you just can't do that. If you try to rely on yourself for everything, if you try to rely on your checking every little detail, you're just going to end up in complete skepticism. Now, Wen says, look, we just don't have any choice but to trust others in our lives. He says no single person is in the position to check up on the reliability of every member of that chain. So the idea is we are constantly relying on others. When I am recording this video, I'm relying on the engineers that I expect they made this microphone well, that they knew what they were doing. But I'm also relying on doctors. The claim is just, you don't have the time to do this in every single thing you do. And so Wen thinks the solution can't just be to give up trusting anybody and just rely only on yourself. There has to be some solution such that when we end up trusting the wrong people, we can self-correct and fix it so that we trust the correct people rather than the wrong people. So something to consider on your own. How do these ideas compare and contrast to those of Descartes so far? But if intellectual autonomy isn't the solution, what is? Well, the first thing to notice is, as we said, a person who's raised their entire life in an echo chamber, they may largely, for the most part, be doing things that seem to be acting in a rational way. Yet again, they're checking on sources. They're not just accepting something just because someone said it. They want to check their credentials, see why they should believe them. Moreover, a lot of their trust comes from how they were raised. When we're born, we naturally trust our parents. This is evolutionarily built into us because it's helpful. We need to navigate the world. There's lots of things that can harm us and even kill us. Our parents, if we trust them, they give us information, help us navigate that world. They tell us not to cross the street, and that helps us not get hit by a car. And by trusting our parents, trusting our surrounding community members and authorities, we thereby make it through those first couple of years alive. And that's reason to think that what they tell us is true and helpful and trustworthy. But if we're born into a family or community that also includes these terrible, maybe moral beliefs or ideas, mistaken ideas about the world around us, and also includes these conspiracy theories about outsiders out to get you and harm you, yet again, you want to avoid those dangers. You want to avoid that car in the street. And the way you've avoided dangers in the past is by trusting these authorities. And now they're telling you that there's these other things out to get you through their misinformation and their nefarious purposes. But the logic of an echo chamber, the claim that you ought to trust these person and not trust those other persons, seems to depend on the order in which evidence is received. The idea here is the reason you trust those person and don't trust the outsiders is because you got the evidence from your family, from your community first. You heard their side first, and their side included, don't trust the other side. Had you heard the other side first, had you been born to a different family, to different parents with different beliefs, to a different community with different political beliefs, then you would have had different beliefs than you do, and you would have trusted different persons than you do. And Wen says that here's the real source of irrationality. So the echo chamber person, it looks like they are trying to act in a rational way where they try to figure out who to trust, who not to trust. They try to update their beliefs and check on sources. But the way in which they're being irrational is incredibly subtle. Those caught in an echo chamber are giving too much weight to evidence that they encounter first, to the evidence they get from maybe the family that they were born in or community that they were born in, just because it's first. Now, our teenager who's born into that echo chamber, would have to do something much more radical than simply reconsidering their beliefs one by one in order to get out of the echo chamber. Because yet again, they don't trust the other side. And so in order to get out of the echo chamber, they'd have to suspend all her beliefs at once and restart the knowledge gathering process, treating all sources as equally trustworthy. And so Wen is suggesting that the only solution to getting out of an echo chamber is something very similar to Descartes' method of doubt that we saw. So remember, Descartes suggests that in order to figure out what's really true, in order to not be deceived, Descartes says we need to engage in what we will call the Cartesian epistemic reboot. So Descartes uses the evil demon in an attempt to help throw away all of his beliefs so he can start over and only accept what's true. And this reset thereby uproots those pesky false beliefs that eluded him before utilizing that process. But notice, Descartes says we're only going to accept what is absolutely certain. And so you can only accept it once you have 100% verified. So you can't trust anything. You can't trust any faculty, even including your senses or anyone else, until you have 100% verified that what they're saying is correct. Wen thinks that this is overdoing. He thinks you're going to get stuck in skepticism if you just try to swipe everything away and never trust anything until you have 100% certainty. So he suggests what we need is a social epistemic reboot. He says we temporarily suspend our beliefs and start over from scratch. However, we still allow mundane common sense beliefs in by trusting our senses and trusting others. So we don't have to first verify for ourselves that we can trust our senses and that we can trust other persons. We don't require certainty like Descartes does. We still start over with our beliefs, but we give equal presumptive trust to all sources so that we can assess the evidence without having that bias towards the evidence we encounter first. We get rid of all of our beliefs and then try to look at both sides at the same time so as to give both of them a fair chance, instead of biasing ourselves to one because we happen to have heard it first. If a social epistemic reboot is what's required to get out of an echo chamber, the question becomes, how do you actually get people to do this? Or how do you get yourself to do it if you, unbeknownst to you, are stuck in an echo chamber? Well, firstly, it's going to be dang hard. You're probably not going to be able to do it on your own. Yet again, this is a theme in Wen and in social epistemology, that the ability to gain knowledge, you aren't going to be able to achieve those things all by yourself. It's going to depend upon other people in your society. And so other people in society, it's not going to help by just bombarding a person that's in an echo chamber with facts and counter evidence for the reasons we've mentioned already. And that's because the root problem in an echo chamber is not a lack of evidence. The problem is misplaced trust. And so if that's the problem, the only way to address the problem is to figure out how to restore that trust in those outside sources, in those right sources that are giving them correct information. Now, some examples suggest the most effective strategy for restoring trust might be experiencing goodwill from outsiders that the echo chamber has taught them to distrust. The example that Wen gives here is that of Derek Black. So Derek Black was the son of a prominent white supremacist within the United States. And Derek Black was being groomed to sort of take over for his father. And when he got through high school, he already was a darling of this movement of white supremacy and alternative right sort of politics within the United States, had his own radio show. When he went to college, Derek Black actually ended up getting out of the white supremacist movement and now helps others try to do so as well, tries to amend for those past actions in that way. But how did Derek Black do it? It wasn't because someone gave him an argument like, here's why you're wrong about this. Look at this statistic. Look at this statistics. Here's where your reasoning goes mistaken. That's not what did it. It's when he went to college, he was exposed to other persons, and there was a Jewish student at his university that attempted to befriend him. And so instead of talking about politics, instead of talking about their belief system, etc., they just hung out. They played video games, they had dinner, and the idea is Derek Black experienced goodwill from this person that he was taught to distrust. And so it wasn't any arguments. By building that relationship, he then started to question, maybe this person isn't so manipulative. Now, I've established this relationship. They seem like a good person. And then that opens up the ability to listen to them and maybe think, maybe my beliefs are mistaken. Maybe I've trusted the wrong persons. Maybe I should start over. And that's what Derek Black did in that case. So that's all for this video. See y'all next time. Bye-bye.